And sit tall, close the eyes, and just allow yourself to arrive in the moment. Notice what it is that you're carrying with you today. Notice how you're feeling. And don't be bored with the inquiry. Be curious about it. Like, what's different today than yesterday? What's different in this moment from the last moment? How am I really in this moment? And then allow yourself to recognize that whatever it is that you are feeling physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it's actually a pretty complicated matter. Allow yourself to acknowledge that complicated matter for what it is. And instead of worrying about absolute answers and wanting things to show up in black or white with no shades in between, give yourself permission to experience the diversity, the multitude of ways that sensations and experiences arrive to us, each with an opportunity to learn a little something about yourself. Be grateful for the many different paths that lead you home to your heart. And drawing the hands together in front of the heart, we'll lift our voices in one beautiful Om. Take a nice breath in. Om. Bowing the head to the heart, acknowledging all that is. And then drawing the face to center, releasing the hands. So today's talk is going to be about the paradigm of a human being, what that actually means to us. And in yoga and Ayurveda, no big matter, just a little something today, in yoga and Ayurveda, there are actually models that have been developed to help us understand ourselves, each other, what it is that we feel and experience in any given moment, how it is that we function in this life. And the model or the paradigm that I'm going to focus on today is the kosha, what's called the Pancha Maya kosha. The word pancha means 5. The word maya is interesting because it's often described as illusion. And the word kosha means sheath or layer. So according to the model of the Pancha Maya kosha, we know that we have at least 5 layers of illusion that we need to work through before we get to the heart of ourselves. And those 5 layers of illusion, that's the word we're going to kind of stick with at least for a little while, each provide us with information about any given experience that colors our view of the world and our place in it. The sages 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago were amazing. What they came to understand about the human being and about how it is that we become so lost and so found and so lost again and so riddled with suffering and healing, that I can't help but smile because we think we're so progressive, We're like, oh yeah, we have nuclear energy and electric cars, and we still don't know anything about ourselves, We're still struggling. 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, they gave us the answer. They wrote it down for us. All you got to do is read it and implement it, reflect upon it, and learn from it. And still, all these thousands of years, thousands and thousands of generations later, we're just not there yet. We're well on the way, but we're not there yet. So what they decided was that a human being is made up of all these different layers. And sometimes it's explained like a bullseye, so that there is a center and there are concentric rings that move away from the center. And that's one way to look at the layers, that you could say like the soul is the center, what we would call in yoga the Atman. But you can also look at it as kind of interweaving layers of existence and experience, and it just depends on what's happening in a given moment. And your soul is always present to that. Your spirit is always present to that. Never is it absent. You just may or may not be aware of its presence. They decided that the first way that we experience our humanness is in the physical body. Kind of a no-brainer, right? That we have this bones and muscle, and that is the first way that we collect information in our humanness, is whatever this physical body collects. And that has a lot of different layers to it as well. So the physical body are the bones of the body, to start with. The bone is the structure of the body. It is the strength of the body. It is the form of the body, at least the crude form that everything else hangs upon. So if your bones are healthy, yay. Then that's one line of information that you're constantly receiving that is coming from a place of no pain. But if your bones are not healthy, then you're acquiring a whole different level of information and understanding. Does that make sense? Yeah. If you're getting older like I am, and your physical body is changing, the bones are changing. Because we all know that as we get older, the bones become a little bit weaker. That's information that's coming in. That's feeding my psyche, feeding my ego, and feeding my understanding of myself as I see myself in this world of illusion. And if I'm not mindful, I will become so obsessed with that particular little bit of information that I actually won't be able to see all the other information that's coming into me. Have you ever met someone like that? Or maybe that's who you are. Maybe you have broken your arm or hurt your leg or cut your toe, and suddenly there's a thought in the mind, I'm never going to be the same again. I'm never going to be the same again. And then that injury to your physical body becomes your story. And when that becomes your story, you immediately shut down to other modes of information, less accessible. Maybe not completely inaccessible, but definitely less accessible. So if you're worried about the bones of your body breaking down, then you're not necessarily concerned with your intellect growing or with your heart opening, because you might be too concerned with the condition of the bones. Make sense? Okay. And the bones are so much more gross. And by gross, I mean present. They're obvious, than the intellect or the heart. They're much easier for us to understand in this life because they're physical, and we exist in a physical world. So the bones of the body, the muscles of the body, the connective tissues of the body, all part of the physical world that we live in. So they are our first line of information. Your physical body, the way you look. Someone tells you, you look pretty or handsome. Well, life just got real good. Someone tells you you're a bit disheveled today. Well, life just didn't get real good, And now, because of the reflection that someone else gave you about your physical body, if you become focused on that, hyper-focused, you shut down to all the other layers of being, and you shut down to your heart. And you become more concerned with how that person can change their perception of you versus discovering and rediscovering who you really are. Still making sense? Yeah. It's complicated. Because when you think about it, it's like if you and I are having an interaction, it seems like it's a one-on-one interaction, so that's pretty straightforward. But if I'm measuring everything that you have ever said to me against everything that anyone else has ever said to me, then I've got 56 years of crazy that I'm going through in my mind, trying to break down and make sense out of. That's amazingly complicated. Like, computers can't even do that. And they can do a lot. And yet my mind thinks it's so smart that it can. But we're not at the mind yet. We're still the physical body. So what other people say to me, what other people say to you about how you look, about how you dress, about how you stand, about how you appear in this physical body. And the things that you experience within this physical body, like when you stub your toe or break an arm or get punched or caressed or kissed or jolted, these are all bits of information that are coming in streams. And those streams of information are cultivating your worldview and your view of yourself. But here's the thing. This physical body is transient. It's not forever. And it's not even for a little while. It's like for the shortest while. Because, Brahmani, you came to class this morning completely healthy. 75 minutes later, what happened? Right. Look at how quick things can change, you know? This physical body changes every single moment. And for some of us, that causes fear. For others, a little bit of fear. For others, maybe there's a healthy perspective on that. But I would suggest that that group is far fewer in number than the group that really is attached to what the body looks like, what the body feels like, and there's a lot of fear about change. But the physical body is not who you are. It's your vehicle. It's what carries your spirit through this life. It gives it a container. And it's meant to change. And if you want proof of that, here's proof. So you were born and you were an infant. And if you go back to, your infant or your toddler days, to the earliest possible memory that you have, your memory tells you that you were there. Even though your body was like, maybe this big or this tall, you were there. Absolutely having that physical experience of being a baby or a toddler. Now jump to like 10 or 12 years old when you're about this tall, and your body is longer and it's different. Your physical body is so much different than when you were an infant or a toddler. And yet you were there. You know you were there, but your body was so much different. Not yet completely developed, growing, probably lots of growing pains. But your conscious awareness, your spirit was within that body. Then jump forward to like 20. When we think we're all grown up, the body is different yet again. And you think back about that and you're like, yeah, I was there. I was absolutely there, but the body was different than when you were a toddler or an adolescent. Then you jump to 30, 40, 50, whatever age you are today. Your body is different yet again, but you are still present. Your body is always changing. Your consciousness is not. Your consciousness is consistently present. So the body is not something to be so attached to. Keep it healthy. Take good care of it. Be appreciative of it. It does so much for us. But don't think that it defines you, because it doesn't. And that's the first thing that the sages said. The Annamaya Kosha, the physical covering of the body, does not define you. It stores information that it collects over the years by way of scars, bruises, by way of feelings and nerve sensations. And it is the grossest way with which we acquire information. And it is the first way that we understand our position in this life and our relationship in this life to all that is. The second kosha is the energetic kosha. And energy, prana, is more subtle than this physical body. It's more subtle than the bones and the muscles. Prana can't be seen, not really. You can be trained to see prana, but it's not typically seen through the naked eye. It's not as obvious as that chair. So it's something that we have to be a little bit more mindful to tune into if we want to understand the pranic flows within the body. And the prana is what instigates, according to certain schools of thought, the flow of blood, all the circulation in the body, the flow of nerve impulses, the flow of thoughts. The prana, or the pranamaya kosha, is what instigates or influences all the movement of energy within the body. So even just my hand moving like this is because of prana. If I had a congestion in my energy of the body, maybe I wouldn't be able to move my arm like this. Maybe I wouldn't be able to lift my elbow up above my shoulder. If the prana becomes congested, causing other faculties within the body to become congested, then we start to see that there are interruptions in the flow of energy. And those interruptions cause us to think. They cause us to form opinions about the quality of ourself and the quality of this life. Because the prana, when it's congested, brings us back to the physical body. It brings us back to the idea of physical pain and suffering, more often than not. It can take us somewhere else, but it's a complicated conversation, so we'll stay here for now. So the prana is also something that we're not typically highly aware of. I mean, we know we breathe in and out, but we don't really have an appreciation for the breath until we can't breathe. Then suddenly we grasp at it. We're breathing every day, hundreds of thousands of times every day. How many times do you put your hand to your heart and lungs and just say, thank you for being with me, for breathing me? There's a school of thought within the yoga tradition, a few, that the breath is actually the mother. That when you breathe in and out, you're not the one breathing. She's breathing. She's breathing into you and she's breathing out from you. She's giving you the gift of life with every inhale, and she's allowing you to express that life with every exhale. So it's a communion of sorts. But we don't look at the breath that way. We look at the breath as, oh, I just ran a mile, I'm really out of breath. Back to the physical body. Oh, they just scared the heck out of me. I lost my breath. The physical body, the mental body, and the energetic body. We don't spend enough time sitting in contemplation of the breath and being aware of all that it connects us to. Is that making sense? Okay. What does it connect us to? Well, you've probably heard me say 1,000 times, and other teachers as well, that tree expires oxygen and it inspires carbon. We expire carbon and we inspire oxygen. So our inspiration and our expiration feeds that tree and feeds us. And therefore, we're dependent upon one another in an amazing, amazing way. If there are no more trees on this planet, guess what happens to us? There's no more us either. And if we need proof of that, on some level, we can look at Easter Island. Not necessarily because there was no more oxygen. There's a whole world that still had trees, but because we can't survive without trees. Without trees for all that they do for us. Not only do they provide a large amount of the oxygen that is necessary for our life, but they also provide nutrients to the soil that feed the food that we grow. They provide a home to animals. They provide shade. They provide so much. Their prana, very much alive and vibrant, just like ours is. Rarely do we stop to think that that tree and I are actually connected. When we feel disconnected from the tree, from the ocean, from the bird, from the grass, from the flower, from each other, that's an interruption in the pranic flow, and your pranamaya kosha, your energetic sheath of illusion, suffers. Because it's like a highway with a bridge, and the bridge collapsed. There's no way to get to that side unless you rebuild the bridge. And when you do start rebuilding the bridge, you've got to focus on the breath. That's a huge part of it, right? What's the first thing they tell you when you go to like a therapist for anxiety? They say you got to learn how to breathe. Because breathing rebuilds the bridges. It reopens the circulation. It brings you back into a presence of yourself that is different from the physical body. It changes too, but not as much. Not as much. And it is a direct connection to something about ourselves that we don't really understand, even though we really try to. So we have the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, the physical body and the energetic body. And there's so much more that I could say about these, but I'm trying not to take too long on each one, or we'll be here till next Wednesday. The next one is the Manomaya Kosha. This is where the real illusion comes in. The Manomaya Kosha is the mind. It is the layer of your understanding of your own existence that's based in your mentality. Oh, goodness, we are all in such trouble, It's just so true, because this mind, when was the last time it stopped talking? Can you even think of a moment? And don't say when you were sleeping, because it didn't stop talking while you were sleeping. You had dreams, even if you don't remember them. The mind is always going. Picking up on this, picking up on that, making up a story about this, making up a story about that, elaborating a story about this, elaborating a story about that. The mind is like the coyote. The mind is a trickster. If it had intention of its own, I would say that its primary intention is to drive us mad and then laugh about it. Yeah, completely. The trickster. The mind, so the physical body takes in all of these experiences. You stub your toe, you bump your knee, you get into some kind of an accident, you feel the warm embrace, you feel the coldness, you're happy with your physical body, you're not happy with your physical body, somebody tells you look pretty, somebody tells you you don't. All this information doesn't just get stuck in the physical body. It goes into the subtle channels as well. All that information that you've taken in through your senses moves through the bones, the muscles, the connective tissues, into the pranic channels, and then into the mental channels. And it takes up residence there. And what that does to us is it clutters our awareness with things that we can't be clear about, with things that we don't know if they're even true or not. And when our mind is cluttered, we shut down to many different types of experiences in life. The heart shuts down. The potential becomes disguised or hidden. And we think that we can think our way out. Like, I can think my way out of that paper bag. And yet you're sitting in the paper bag, still thinking. And eventually you say, oh, there's no way out of the paper bag. But one entire end of the paper bag is completely open. All you have to do is stop thinking, pay attention on purpose, and see. Use the senses for your benefit, not for your detriment. Use the senses to empower this physical vehicle, to empower the prana to be known, to empower the mind to be spacious and open, rather than to bog it down with a bunch of confusion and frustration. These mental thoughts become stories and impressions. And how do we know that much of what the mind tells us or talks about isn't accurate? Well, because 99.9% of what we say or what comes from the mind is memory. And it is. If we've been alive on this earth for one day, this moment, our mental impression of this moment is based on the other 23 hours and 59 minutes and 59 seconds. This moment is based on everything mentally that came before it. But we don't remember actually what happened before. Not completely. And we can tell ourselves we do, but we don't. I remember when I was a child, my Nana had one of those hydrangea bushes, those big snowball bushes. And some of you have heard this story before. And I was little, I guess I was probably like 5 years old or something. And I love bugs, and I still do to this day. Absolutely love them. And I love spiders and snakes and mice. They're just amazing. And so I'm sitting out there, and I have this little like margarine cup, you know, like when they were those bright green and bright yellow colors. And my brother's sitting out there with me, and I had a friend. He's a little spider. He's actually big. He's like the size of my fist. He was like goopy looking, had long, spindly legs, you know. And I put the margarine cup over him and made it his house, you know. And my brother and I are sitting there, and he's doing his thing. And I'm having a time with my friend, the spider. And Nana comes out, and she says, "What's underneath of there?" She takes the margarine cup off, and she steps on the spider. She goes, "It'll bite you." Now, I think back about that. And in my mind, I see a spider that's like worthy of arachnophobia, you know, like fear of spiders. Huge, round body, like seriously, like this big, long, spindly legs, you know? And the reality of it is this. It's probably this big, you know? And Nana probably wasn't quite so adamant, but I was heartbroken when she stepped on it, you know? But whatever it was that happened that morning, I have an impression of it, but my impression is not completely accurate. So if I'm not careful, my mental state of being will take me down a path of constant inconsistencies to the point where I become confused and frustrated about my physical experience of this life and my energetic experience of this life and all the other layers that we're still to talk about and my mental experience of this life. If I am focusing so much on only my impression of the past, then I'm also not giving this moment an opportunity. And what an unfortunate thing that is, because there's not a person sitting in this room who is moving forward into their past. You're moving forward into your future. So if you want to cultivate a future that is an inspired space to live in, then be present in this moment and form this moment with the qualities that you wish to have present in your future. Most of us don't like some major part of our past. So why are we bringing it forward? Why are we carrying it forward and giving it power to become our future? We need to start over. We need to utilize our mind in a way that allows us to have spaciousness in our thinking and our creativity, that allows us to honor the past and everything that happened before, while also not being attached to it. And that's hard. That is so hard. But is there anybody in this room who can say that latching onto the past has served you? No hands up? No? Is there anybody in the room who has been on purpose present in a given moment that has served them? Totally. So right there, you know you have the power to make this and all future moments a much different place than the past ones. Because you can call yourself into presence on purpose, rein your mind in, rein the thoughts in, acknowledge that they're there, choose what to focus on. In class this morning, I suggested to you that you have the ability to choose what you're going to see and what you're going to take into your mind. Some people don't agree with that. They say, no, I don't. I said, no, yeah, you do. If you're walking through the garden and you see the flower, you say, oh, I'm going to go look at that flower. Is that not your choice? Of course it is. You see the butterfly and you're like, oh, I'm going to go over to the butterfly. Is that not your choice? Of course it is. The sun is rising. I'm going to go up to the pagoda and watch the sunrise. Is that not your choice? Of course it is. It is also your choice to focus on something that is not quite so nourishing. So you do have the choice of what to focus on. It's complicated because the negative things or the harmful things or the things that aren't really serving us so well right now, they're sticky like flypaper. You have to know how to unstick yourself. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just a big old sticky mess. Completely. Yeah, exactly, right? Okay, so now here's your task. Some of you were like, ew. Every time you're stuck on a thought about the past, look at it as flypaper. Get yourself as unstuck as quickly as possible. So the mental plays, good things too. It does good things for us as well. But there's got to be space there. If there's no space in the mind, then you don't have the space to mull over ideas and thoughts and express creativity. If you're filling yourself up with one story or 5 stories about lacking, about this type of quality, then you're not holding any kind of space for your worthiness, for your value, for your creative self. Your tummy, right? Which is like right about here. Your tummy, they say, is about the size of your fist. Maybe a little bit bigger, but just about the size of your fist. And they say that what you put in your tummy, how much should you fill your tummy with food? The size of your fist. Should you?
That's what I've read.
How much, Brahmani?
Like 2/3 of the way max. 2/3 of the way?
Max. Why? Because you need space to churn. Exactly. So every time.
Usually you're full. Like you have a moment where you're like, I think that's enough. That's your body telling you it's already at that point.
Absolutely. And there's the Ayurvedic burp, right? Yeah. The Ayurvedic burp. If you do that little tiny burp, that's enough. That's telling you you've reached your limit. But we say, oh no, I haven't. That coconut coffee cake is crazy amazing. I have enough room for one more piece. Of course I do. By the way, Linda, that is really amazing.
Thank you. It's walnut.
That's even more impressive. If we don't leave space in our tummy, then we can't digest our food properly. If we don't leave space in our mind, then we cannot digest our thoughts properly. Does that make sense? Totally. Because the thoughts like a dryer too, right? Or a washing machine. You're only supposed to fill them to a certain height. If you fill them more than that, then what ends up happening is what's in there won't get cleaned or it won't get dried. So when you find that your mind is bogged down with 10,000 thoughts, or that you're repeating the same thought over and over and over and over again, stop. Stop on purpose. Come into a place where you are consciously breathing in and breathing out, interacting with the pranamaya kosha to bring open circulation to the body, to the mind, and where you can be a little bit more quiet. That's why they say take 3 breaths before you make a decision. Because in those 3 breaths, your entire mind can change. So then we come to the Vijnanamaya kosha, and the Vijnanamaya kosha is the intellectual sheath, which is, according to some, a component of the mind, and according to others, it's different. It's the discerning faculty that each one of us has, that we can look and we can logically assess things. But be mindful that there is a difference between true logical assessment and thinking that we know that we've assessed something. For example, a person who this is a good one. A person who is constantly tripping or misstepping makes the assessment that one leg is shorter than the other, and they go to a doctor, and the doctor agrees with them. But actually, at another point in time, 2 years down the road, they find they don't have one leg shorter than the other. This is a very common diagnosis, by the way. They don't have one leg shorter than the other. They were wearing shoes that had worn unevenly because they weight bear unevenly in the left versus right side of the body. So it was throwing their whole physical, energetic, mental, and intellectual sheath off. They thought that they discerned, they thought they understood, only to find out later that they didn't. So we have to be mindful when we are engaging in the Vijnanamaya kosha, in the intellectual sheath, that it's actually the intellectual sheath and not just the mind playing tricks on us. They say somewhere on the order of 75% of people who are diagnosed with a short leg don't actually have one. That they actually have something else happening in their physical body that is making it appear that way, and they need to continue their inquiry. Well, I would say that that's probably true for every single situation in life. We rarely get to the root of the thing. We get to some shallow, superficial level, and we think we understand it all. The intellect calls us to go deeper. The intellect calls us to get to the root of the matter. The intellect calls us to understand. We can say also that the intellect calls us to come home to knowing. To knowing. To knowing who we really are, what truth or completeness there is to the connection between our true self and source, and our true self and each other. So the intellect is knowing, but it's knowing through discernment. It's knowing through discernment. And it uses logic. Logic. Pure logic, like Vulcan logic for those Star Trek fans in the room. Like Spock, you know. How many of you are Star Trek? Have ever watched Star Trek? Yeah. Yeah. And so Spock was always very much like, you know, no emotion. Oh, but he did have emotion, didn't he? He actually had quite a bit of it. He was one of my husband's favorite characters. He was very much a Star Trek person. So we don't want to be cold and unemotional, because our emotions are in some part what empower us to experience the beauty of this life. But we also don't want to be a slave to our emotions. So we can't really trust the mind, because the mind is a great storyteller and a great fabricator. But we can train ourselves to come into a healthy relationship with our intellect, so that our intellect can help us to regulate our emotions and to regulate how it is that we perceive the stories that we tell ourselves. And that the intellect can also support us in coming closer to a state of equanimity, in coming closer to a state of pure awareness without attachment to the outcome. Because the intellect will tell you, when it's a healthy intellect, it will say to you, there's no sense in being attached to the outcome. The outcome is not under your control. The only thing that is under your control is the way you walk the path. The outcome will be what it is. So walk the path. The mind says, oh, no. That outcome is completely mine. I'm working for it. I deserve it. And if it ain't there when I get there, there's going to be some hell to pay. And then the prana gets all congested because now you're tense over the idea that I'm doing all this work and I'm not going to get what I want. And then some part of the prana is open and thinking, well, actually I'm doing the work, so of course I'm going to get what I want. And we're not in the moment. And the confusion between the open prana and the closed pranic channels are leading to imbalances in the physical body that, if not taken care of appropriately, will manifest as significant chronic issues over time that cause pain in the physical realm. All the connections making good sense? Yeah. So then the final sheath that we have, the fifth sheath, is the Anandamaya Kosha. This is called the bliss sheath. Ananda is bliss. I heard somebody talking about this one time, and they said, yeah, it's your happy place. It's like, do what feels good. It's like, no. Not. No. Ananda is divine bliss. It is the place where you love without hesitation. It is the place where you are peaceful. It is the place where you experience joy, absolute joy, for no freaking reason. It's just like the sun rising can bring tears to your eyes because the beauty of it is so inherently true. A child laughing causes you to feel warm and a pure sense of innocent joy. This is Anandamaya Kosha. Pure, innocent joy with no attachment. Now, what do I mean by no attachment? Wasn't I just attached to the sunrise or the child smiling? Well, not really. You were in a way, but you're also not in a way, because you're having appreciative joy. You're not saying, okay, give me that sunrise now. It's mine, belongs to me. You're not saying about the child, well, if the child stops laughing, then I'm going to fall to the ground and crumble. No, you're having appreciative joy in a moment. In other words, you're being present in a moment. Anandamaya Kosha, when we're on one side of it, is also union with God, union with your devotion. It is the ability to take refuge in that and to let all of your doubts fall away. So it's obviously not an easy place to get to in any way, shape, or form. And sometimes these koshas are talked about like lenses. So at the very center of Anandamaya Kosha, there's this little ball, which is oftentimes depicted as, right? And that little ball is the Atman. And that Atman is your true self. And that Atman is covered over by each of these lenses. Or by each of these lampshades, maybe that helps. Like you have a light bulb in the center. If you have only one lampshade, that light's pretty bright. Put 2 lampshades on, it's dimmer. It's 3, 4, 5. Now you can hardly see. So these shades or these sheaths, they cover our brilliance and our natural light and make it obscure to us, difficult to find. difficult to reflect upon, difficult to see and identify. And if you look at this as, here's my true self, Atman, here's my Anandamaya Kosha, and this is a two-way lens, like the lens on my glasses. One way looks toward the Atman, and one way looks away. So here's Anandamaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Annamaya Kosha, outside world. If we are anchored in the outside world only, then all that information is going to discolor every single lens, and we will rarely get a glimpse of our true self. But if our awareness is anchored within, in an internal inquiry about the true nature of ourself, then our vision goes this way. And it clears the discoloration of the lenses so that they more appropriately reflect the truth of the self rather than the outside world. The present moment rather than the past. Freedom rather than bondage. Healing rather than suffering. Wholeness rather than brokenness. Does that make sense? Questions, reflections, thoughts? Yeah, no. That could be like a week-long conversation. Easily. Lifetime-long conversation. It's challenging, but it's a path. It's absolutely a path. Everything in yoga is a path. All of this wonderful information, the scriptures, the stories, the parables, all of it, every single thing has a path inherent in it for you to follow. So what's the path here? Well, very straightforward. One of the paths of the 5 koshas are to come to know each kosha. Come to understand your physical body, how to take care of it, how to keep it healthy, how to heal from the physical traumas of this life, like a cut on the toe or a broken arm. How to heal your relationship with yourself when your body is breaking down due to age or illness. Come to know the physical body. Have compassion for the physical body. Practice the higher qualities, the divine qualities, compassion, love, and acceptance. And then, potentially next, but they overlap too, come to understand the pranic realm of your body. Inquire about your energy. Come to understand it, and don't accept half explanations for things as being whole. Instead, really investigate. And for a little while, bring everything back to the prana. Oh, I'm feeling very shaky today. Wow, that must be my prana. What is happening with my prana that I feel shaky today? How do I ground that down? Be curious about the function of prana in your own body. There are scriptures that tell you, too, by the way, that burping and blinking your eyes is completely natural and not an issue, unless it is. And if it is, then it is a disturbance in your prana. Shaking is a disturbance in your prana. Fidgeting is a disturbance in your prana. And that we should work to cultivate the prana into a place of having an anchor so that we're not wasting it. Because prana is the energy of awakening. And if you are sending your prana out through drama, through arguments, through distractions, through unnecessary body movements, then that means that you are not directing that prana toward your awakening, toward your remembering, and toward your healing. It's kind of like you got to rein it in. Anybody in here fisher people? You go fishing? Yeah? Some, yeah. Well, in my younger days, we used to go fishing. And I'm a vegetarian now. I do not do fishing anymore. In my younger days, we went. And the one thing is you got to reel the fish in, right? Because otherwise what happens? it gets away completely. You got to reel your prana in. Otherwise it gets away. Because prana, when it's disturbed, can be wild as a fish. And for those of you who have never tried to reel, like, a grouper. Those are the big ones, right? The groupers? In New Jersey, yeah. Or the bluefish even. Bluefish are like crazy. Totally nuts. They start jumping all over the place. Disturbed prana. Absolutely disturbed prana. So if you don't reel your prana in and bring it into yourself and hold on to it like it's yours, because it is, and like it matters, then it's just going to fly. It's going to fly, and it's going to feed every distraction, and you're going to become less and less stable, and more and more vulnerable, more and more fearful. Then you go in and you start working with the mind. And you start recognizing that, well, wow, why am I reacting to this? What is it that I'm thinking right now? Because I'm so busy reacting in my own mind that I'm not actually even listening. I stopped listening. Oh, what an unfortunate thing that is, to stop listening. To stop hearing consciously. My mind is working up such a frenzy, I stopped breathing. My mind is working up such a frenzy, I stopped loving. So we got to work with the mind and realize what's valid and what isn't valid, or what has some validity and what has no validity. And then understand that the mind is like a computer. Its job is to think, and it does it really well, and it's going to do it whether or not you want it to. So don't be attached to it. If things come up, like having experience with PTSD myself, there came a point in time where I really needed to grab hold of my mind and say, what you're thinking isn't happening right now. It's no longer real. Put it away. And yes, you do have to be disciplined about it sometimes. There's a time to be soft and sweet, and there's a time to be disciplined. And when it comes to the mental, you got to be disciplined. Because otherwise the mind takes that softness, that tenderness, and toys with it, like a cat toys with a mouse. And then you're done for. Then go to the Vijnanamaya Kosha. But again, this is not like necessarily in order. They're going to overlap with each other. And ask yourself, am I really discerning this? What am I overlooking? What am I not seeing? Don't blame. Don't assume. Don't think you have the answer already, because the answer is always much bigger and much more complicated. Just keep discerning. In yoga, there's a beautiful practice called neti neti. Not this neti. But the neti neti, not this, not this. Not that, not that. So you're sitting there and you're asking yourself in any moment, what's real? Not that. Not that. Not that. Oh, sure it is. My past is real. No, actually it's not. It's not happening. It's the past. It's not real anymore. You have an impression of it. And the impression serves a purpose if it's a healthy impression. And by healthy impression, I mean an accurate impression. Or an impression that has taught you something about how to be a better person, how to be a kinder person, how to be a compassionate person. The rest of it is fluff. So at some point when you're ready, you got to let it go. Because if you're basing everything you understand on today, it's like this. Well, I'm going to look at every year over the past 56 years. Today is February 16th? Okay. So on February 16th of the past 56 years, it has rained 75% of the time. So that means it's going to rain today. Is that ridiculous? Right. Exactly. So you see the link? So if you base everything today on what has happened in the past, it's just as ridiculous. You have to let today be what it's going to be, to some degree. And then Anandamaya Kosha. What is happiness versus satisfaction? What is joy versus egoic desire? What is stealing your joy from you? And what gives it to you or opens you up to it? So it's a path. The koshas are a path. So Pancha Maya Kosha, Pancha 5. Maya, translated as illusion, experience also. Kosha, sheaths, levels, types. The 5 levels of experience. The 5 levels of illusion. The ultimate moksha, the ultimate kaivalya, the ultimate liberation is when the sheaths fall away and you come to know the Atman only and not based on anything that the 5 sheaths say, even Anandamaya Kosha, because even Anandamaya Kosha can be discolored by reflections from the outside world. It's a lot. Do you feel like you understand yourself a little better? Yeah, less, right? Less. Like, I thought I had myself all figured out. Damn. Yeah. So there's always work to do. There's just always work to do. And it's not like a heavy kind of burdensome work. It's like you get to inquire. How beautiful is that? That you actually get to live a life where you get to inquire. Who am I really? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What am I assessing? What makes me happy? What is happy? You get to ask these beautiful questions, and then you get to toss them away and just have an experience of being alive. But don't toss them away too quickly, because some of those answers are very relevant to your spiritual awakening. Part of your job is to just figure out which ones. And it's not an easy matter. It's very complicated. Questions? Reflections? Yes, Leslie.
So if you are on your path,
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're starting to know yourself better, would an accurate description, I'm trying to use like a clear and present channel, kind of like when you feel like you're in alignment and all the shades or the sheaths have fallen away.
Look at it
That
this
one
way.
moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then
and
that-
usually it is one moment.
Yeah, it just seems like I can get one moment and I'm that clear and present channel and I can do whatever it is I need to do if I'm like doing Reiki or what, but then it's gone.
You ever in a car that doesn't have a really great radio? Like when I was younger, none of our cars had really great radios. And we'd be riding somewhere and we'd be trying to tune in to like, you know, our favorite radio station. And you'd hit a spot and you'd get it. And then there it goes again. And it typically happened in the middle of your favorite song, and you typically ended up cursing at the radio. That's what it's like. It's like most of our time is spent in the static. And that static is very chaotic and random, and you're not ever really sure what you're listening to. It's like, is this AM or FM radio? Oh my goodness, you know. What station is this? Sometimes you get 2 stations coming in. You ever have that happen? It's like so weird. 3, you know, you start hearing all these different voices and you know that they're different stations, but there's no clarity. And then in a moment, clarity. And then in just as much of a moment, static. The static occurs 99.9% of the time. The clarity occurs 0.1 or less, depending on the individual. When you come into a place of deep, sincere spiritual practices, Now you're at 99.8% of the time static, 0.2 or less clear. Now you come into a place where your spiritual practices are deeply sincere. You practice every day. And you practice many times every day. 99.9% static, 0.1% or less clear. We're never going to be 99% clear in any more than a small moment. It will always revert back because that's our karma, is to work through all the mishmash. It does happen. People like Amma, Dalai Lama, maybe they get to 70% clear. But can you imagine that? What that would be like to be like 70% clear? Could you even imagine what it would be like to be 20% clear? Think about your life, right? So your life, 24 hours in one day, to be clear. What's 70% of 24? Somebody do the math. What is it? Oh my goodness. You're really good. Imagine what that would be to be clear. Imagine what it would be clear, what it would be to be clear 10% of that. 2.4 hours. 2.4 hours of no distractions, so undisturbed, undistracted, and unaffected for 2.4 hours out of a day. And yet we complain we don't have an hour to do our yoga practice. So much static. So when you do fine-tune into the radio station and you get it for just a moment, just be grateful for it. Be grateful for it and let it inspire you to collect up your karma, to resolve your stories, to care for this physical vehicle of a body, to care for your mind by way of discipline and presence, and to care for your intellect by way of inquiry, constant compassion, and a constant openness to unity. And then to also embrace Ananda by recognizing that fleeting things do not produce happiness. Fleeting things produce disappointment. Love, joy, and unity produce happiness by way of divine happiness. Yeah, it's a great question. Any others? Casey?
I can share my experience with the body and mind.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was like 10 years old, I had really bad pneumonia and it almost killed me. But after that I had really bad chronic sinus infections. And then I would have really bad anxiety, but I kind of forgot about the sinus infections. I just thought it was like going into middle school and stuff like that. So I just learned how to live with it. And then last summer, the pollen was really bad. And that would kill me because of my sinuses. So I was like, I have to desperately find a cure. And then I found one, and I learned how to breathe. And that's what kind of brought me to spirituality. Because for all that time, I couldn't breathe. My sinuses just wouldn't let me.
Isn't that amazing? I mean, I love that. You shared that. Thank you so much. Because first of all, you're inspiring me now to remember that when we work with children with anxiety, it is not always what we think it is. It is not. When we ourselves are living with anxiety and with fear, it's not always what we think it is. Diligence and discipline in the inquiry is necessary. And sometimes the resolution comes from the simplest place, which is really not so simple. But in comparison to all the static it is, is to learn how to breathe. Absolutely. And now all those stories have to be rewritten. They all have to be rewritten because none of them held the absolute truth. But the breath held the truth. The breath held some part of the truth of your own healing. It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Okay. So we're going to stop there because we're going to get ready for Arati now. I'm so grateful for you having this conversation with me this morning. I know it was a lot of information. Some days I don't really know what I'm because I don't prepare. I wait until I kind of feel. And the coaches came up in the yoga class this morning, and it was like, oh yeah, we haven't talked about those in a while. Let's do that. It's a good one. So thank you for sitting with me with that, and for taking it forward in your own life to discover what it means to you, and to commit to the inquiry, commit to the path. This is your life. This is not, a channel to be flipped through on the TV. This is your life. So whatever paradigms are out there, it's worth investigating. Stay with one so that you can become skillful at it. But don't be closed to any of them, because you never know which one's going to bring you closest to the truth. But when you find a paradigm that works for you, when you find a model that really opens you up to a deeper and deeper truth about yourself, stay with that. Continue, because it's giving you skill of how to live, of how to be alive. And eventually that will lead to the joy and to the revelation or the realization of relationship with the Atman, with the inner self. So, we're going to take a 5 or 10 minute break. 5, maybe 4. And then we're going to meet back here for Arati. So I hope you stay. And if you're heading out for today, then I'm just so grateful for you being here. And I wish you so many blessings and so much love. Namaste, everybody. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And I also need melted beef. Yeah. Thank you. Oh, no, you're fine. But I have something that you might want to
I actually wanted to talk to you about that as well. I think I know what you're talking about. Thank you. How are you, Rich?
I'm okay.
Thank you for taking Marika out yesterday.
Oh, you're welcome.
She's such a little schemer. As soon as I came in, she was like, oh. And I think she did the same thing before.
That's what they do. Isn't it?
Totally. Absolutely. It's just so funny because I'm like, we know the truth.
You know why they do it?
Of course, it's because of love.
Because it works.
Oh yeah, that too. For sure.
We only think we're as smart as we are.
It's true. We're nowhere near.
It's my favorite incense.
Oh, I love.
I need to run and get my tools, but I'm going to work on the floor a little this afternoon.
Oh, sure.
And I'll send them tomorrow.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. And if the counts are, I'll try to get over there to put them away, but if they're not, I'm just put them there.
that's okay.
It's fine. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm gonna do what am I doing? The bell?
You're going to do the bell, and then the prasad, and Kelly can do the kumkum.
I don't know.
I know that we're first and last stanzas and we're only first.
Correct.
We still need seats.
No. She's not doing diksha. She's just receiving her name.
Okay.